I saw my army uniform hanging from a donation rack between a cracked coffee maker and a box of faded Christmas lights. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then I saw the brass buttons, the pressed sleeve, and the white tag tied where my unit patch rested against the shoulder. My son Daniel stood beside the rack with a clipboard in his hand, talking to a museum volunteer like he had just done something generous. I walked across the community center floor slowly, but every step felt like I was marching toward a grave. "Daniel!" I said. He turned, and the smile slipped off his face before he could hide it. "Dad, I was going to tell you." My granddaughter Maddie stood near the folding tables, holding a paper cup she had forgotten to drink from. I reached for the sleeve, but Daniel stepped between me and the rack. "Don't," he said softly. "They're taking it to the museum. It'll be preserved. That uniform wasn't yours to give." People nearby went quiet, not all at once, just enough for me to hear the room noticing us. Daniel leaned closer. His voice dropped into that careful tone people use when they think age has made you unreasonable. "Dad, please, don't embarrass yourself." The words landed harder than if he had shouted. I looked at the donation tag. Daniel Henson had signed his name on the line marked donor, and under item description he had written 3 words, Army Dress Uniform, as if that was all it was. Maddie moved closer. "Dad, did Grandpa say you could bring it?" Daniel didn't look at her. "This is not the place." "It was in my closet," I said. "In my house. And it has been sitting there for years," Daniel answered. "You never talk about it. You barely look at it except Memorial Day, and then you shut everybody out." I kept my hand near the sleeve but did not touch it. He softened his face then, which somehow made it worse. "I'm trying to help you let go." A laugh almost came out of me, but it had no humor in it. Across the room, the museum volunteer began sliding the uniform into a clear garment bag. The metal bar caught the overhead light for 1 sharp second. Behind it, something small and pale flashed against the dark cloth. Then the zipper closed. Daniel took my elbow like I needed steadying. I pulled away and looked at him. "You have no idea what you just gave away." Daniel kept his hand close to my elbow as the volunteer carried the garment bag toward the museum table. I didn't need help walking. I needed my son to stop acting like I did. Maddie followed us across the community center floor. "Grandpa, I can ask them to hold it," Daniel turned on her. "Maddie, stay out of this." A man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses looked up from behind the table. His name tag read Arthur Bell, Curator. "This is yours?" he asked me. Before I could answer, Daniel set the clipboard down. "It's a family donation." My father served, and we thought the museum would be the right place for it. Arthur looked from Daniel to me, then back to the garment bag. "That's generous." "It's not generous if the man who wore it didn't give it," Maddie said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Enough." Arthur lowered his pen. That was the first time someone in that room looked at me instead of around me. "Misher." "Henson," he said, "did you intend to donate this uniform today?" The question was simple. It still took me a second to answer. "No." Arthur's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. He pulled the intake form back across the table and read the top line. Daniel had signed it in bold, clean letters. Under reason for donation, he had written, "Family donation, preservation." Arthur tapped the paper once with his finger. "Henson, museum policy prefers direct permission from the owner when the item is still in the family." Daniel gave a short laugh. "It came from his closet. I'm his son." "That may be true," Arthur said, "but it doesn't answer my question." For one brief second, the room belonged to the truth. Daniel looked embarrassed now, but not guilty. That made it harder to hate him. "I was trying to protect it," he said. Before something happened to it. Something in the way he said that made Maddie look at him. "Before what happened?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer. Arthur carefully laid the form beside the garment bag. "I won't process it today." I looked at the uniform sealed in plastic, its sleeve folded wrong, its metals pressed flat against the cloth. Arthur followed my eyes and said quietly, "I'll keep it aside until this is settled." Daniel exhaled like I had caused trouble on purpose. But Maddie was staring at the form. "Dad," she said, softer now, "why did you write preservation?" Arthur Bell did not call that evening. He called the next morning, just after 7, while I was standing in the kitchen with my coffee untouched beside the sink. I let it ring twice before answering. "This is Walt Henson," Arthur said. "I'm sorry to bother you early, but I need to ask you something before I catalog the uniform." My hand tightened around the phone. Across the table, Maddie looked up from her cereal. Daniel was at the counter, pretending not to listen. Arthur cleared his throat. "When we prepare a uniform for intake, we check the metal bar, stitching, tags, and any loose paper so nothing gets damaged." Daniel turned around then. I closed my eyes. "What did you find?" There was a pause on the line, not long, but careful. "A small index card," Arthur said, "folded flat behind the metal bar." The kitchen went still. Maddie's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Daniel frowned like the curator had said something impossible. "What kind of card?" Daniel asked. Arthur must have heard him because he answered plainly. "White index card. Old. Soft at the folds. 6 handwritten names." I set the coffee mug down before my hand could shake hard enough to drop it. Daniel looked at me. "Names?" I didn't answer. Arthur kept his voice low. "Mr. Henson." I wouldn't have mentioned it, except the card wasn't loose by accident. It was placed there. Carefully. Maddie stood now. "Grandpa?" I turned away from both of them and looked out the kitchen window at the empty driveway. Arthur said, "I have not removed anything beyond checking that it was safe. The card is still with the uniform." "Good," I said. Daniel stepped closer. "Dad, whose names?" I covered the phone with my palm. "Not now." His face hardened, but there was uncertainty under it. Arthur spoke again. "There's one more thing. I checked because the handwriting looked deliberate." My chest tightened. "The names on that card," he said. "They match something already in our museum." Maddie whispered, "What does that mean?" Arthur did not answer her. He waited for me, but I could not make the words come. Finally, he said, "Mr. Henson, before I catalog this as a donated uniform, I need to know what those 6 names are doing inside it." Arthur asked us to come before the museum opened. Daniel drove, but nobody spoke during the 10 minutes across town. Maddie sat in the back seat with her arms folded, watching me in the rearview mirror like she was afraid I might disappear before we got there. Arthur met us at the side entrance and unlocked the door without ceremony. The museum was quiet in that early morning way, all polished floors and glass cases, with old flags hanging above shadowed uniforms that belonged to men who could no longer explain themselves. My uniform lay on a padded table under a soft lamp. Arthur did not touch it at first. He pointed to a narrow display on the wall behind him, where 6 names were printed beneath a faded unit photograph. "These are the names I meant," he said. Maddie stepped closer and read them silently. Daniel stared at the wall, then at the folded card resting beside my metal bar. "So they were in his unit?" Arthur nodded once. "That is all I can confirm from our records here." Daniel let out a breath, half relief and half frustration. "Then that's what I said. It's military grief, old grief." Maddie turned on him. "Old grief doesn't mean fake grief. I didn't say fake. You said stuck." Daniel looked at me, but I kept my eyes on the 6 names. Arthur slid the card closer without opening it further. "Mr. Henson, I can hold the uniform until you decide what should happen to it, but I won't catalog it as a simple donation. That was the first mercy anyone had offered me in 2 days." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, if these men are already on the wall, why keep the card inside the uniform?" The question hung there, sharp and fair. I could have answered. I almost did. Instead, I looked at Arthur. "May I see it?" He handed me the folded card with both hands. The paper felt thinner than I remembered, worn soft from years of being opened and closed. I kept it folded. Maddie watched my thumb press against the crease. Daniel's voice dropped. "You've been carrying that around for years, haven't you?" I said nothing. Maddie looked at her father. "Then why don't you know who they are?" Arthur left us alone near the display table. Not completely alone. He stayed behind the front desk, close enough to protect the uniform, far enough to let the silence do its work. Maddie stood beside me, looking at the folded card in my hand. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "You can ask. Will you answer?" I looked at her then, and the softness in her face almost broke me. Daniel crossed his arms. "Maddie, don't push him." She did not turn around. "Somebody has to." I opened the card just enough to see the first name, then folded it shut again. Maddie noticed. Daniel noticed too. "You know them by heart," she said. I slipped the card back beside the metal bar. "Some names should not have to be looked up." Daniel gave a tired sigh. "This is exactly what I meant." You do this every year. You shut down, you stop answering calls, you sit with that uniform like it's the only thing in the house that matters. My hand moved before I thought. I touched the sleeve, right below the shoulder seam. The wool was still smooth there. Daniel had at least carried it carefully, even if he had not understood what he carried. Maddie followed my hand. "Grandpa, why is the card so worn if it was just stored behind the metals?" Daniel looked at the card again. I stepped back from the table. "Because paper wears when people handle it." "When did you handle it?" she asked. I did not answer. Daniel's voice softened, but only a little. "Dad, nobody's trying to take your service away." I turned toward him. "No." You just decided what it meant without asking. That shut him up. Maddie moved closer to the uniform. She did not touch it, but her eyes traveled across the buttons, the ribbons, the sleeve, the metal bar. Then her gaze stopped. "Grandpa," she said slowly, "why do you keep touching that same spot?" I looked down and realized my fingers had returned to the metal bar again, resting near a narrow, empty space I had not meant them to find. Daniel noticed it too. His face changed from irritation to confusion. Maddie whispered, "Was something there?" I pulled my hand away. Neither of them moved, and for the first time, Daniel looked at the uniform like it might answer a question he was afraid to ask. Daniel leaned closer to the uniform, careful now, like the wool might accuse him if he moved too fast. "There's a gap," he said. Maddie stood on the other side of the table. I saw it too. I kept my eyes on the floor. The metal bar was still pinned straight, but near the end, one narrow space sat empty. The cloth beneath it was slightly darker, protected for years by something no longer there. Daniel pointed, then stopped before his finger touched it. "What was there?" I said nothing. He looked at Maddie, then back at me. "Dad, you kept this thing perfect. The buttons are polished. The ribbons are straight. Even the sleeve is brushed." "This thing," I said quietly, "is a uniform," Daniel swallowed. "Okay, the uniform." Maddie's voice softened. "Grandpa, if one medal is missing, maybe the museum needs to know that before they display it." That was her way of asking without cornering me. I looked at the empty space. For a moment, I could almost feel the weight that used to hang there. Daniel picked up the donation form Arthur had left on the desk and stared at his own handwriting. "Family donation, preservation," he read under his breath. Then he looked back at the metal bar, and something in his face shifted. "You didn't lose it," he said. I did not answer. "You removed it," he added. Maddie looked at me. "Did someone ask for it?" My throat tightened. The museum lights hummed above us. Somewhere behind the front desk, Arthur turned a page and pretended not to hear. Daniel stepped back from the table. "All these years, I thought you kept the uniform because of what it said about you." I finally looked at him. His voice dropped. "But that missing medal, that was for somebody else, wasn't it?" I touched the edge of the table, not the uniform. That one, I said, wasn't mine to keep. Maddie's eyes filled, but she did not ask another question. Daniel did. Then whose was it? I turned toward the 6 names on the wall. The answer was there, and it wasn't. Maddie found the calendar after we got home. Daniel had gone quiet on the drive back, and I had taken my uniform's absence with me into the house like a cold draft. I sat in the kitchen chair nearest the window. The same chair where I drank coffee most mornings and pretended Memorial Day was just another square on the wall. Maddie stood by the refrigerator, looking at the calendar I had forgotten to take down. "Grandpa," she said, "why do you still have May up?" Daniel looked from the sink. "It's July. I know," she said. "That's why I'm asking." I did not turn around. Maddie stepped closer to the calendar. Her finger stopped on Memorial Day, where 3 words were written in my own hand. Read the 6. Daniel came over slowly. He stared at the words like they had been hidden in plain sight for years, because they had. "You wrote that?" he asked. I looked at the backyard instead of him. Every year, Maddie's voice changed. Not louder, just steadier. "Those are the 6 names from the card." Daniel touched the edge of the calendar, then pulled his hand back like it belonged to someone else. "You had a reminder?" "I didn't need one," I said, "but I wrote it down anyway." "Why?" I closed my eyes. Because some promises grow heavier when nobody sees them. Because a man can forget where he set his glasses and still remember the sound of a mother asking whether her boy was brave. But I did not say that. Maddie looked at Daniel. "You said he only looked at the uniform on Memorial Day." Daniel's face tightened. "He wasn't just looking at it," she said. "He was reading the names." The room went quiet except for the refrigerator humming. Daniel turned to me, and for the first time, he did not sound angry. "Dad, how many years?" I kept my eyes on the calendar. "Since I came home," I said. Maddie's hand covered her mouth. Daniel looked at the 3 words again, then toward the empty hallway where my closet door stood open. "If you read them every year," he said, "why did you always do it alone?" Daniel spread the papers across my kitchen table like he was finally seeing them instead of managing them. The museum donation form sat beside Maddie's phone photo of the memorial panel, and next to that, the calendar still turned to May. He touched the line where he had written preservation. "I thought that word made it respectful," he said. Maddie stood across from him. "You wrote it before you knew what you were preserving." Daniel looked toward me. I sat in the same chair, hands folded, saying nothing. Silence had been my habit so long it felt safer than breath. Maddie tapped the photo on her screen. "The 6 names are on the wall. They're on Grandpa's card, and they're on his calendar every Memorial Day." Daniel leaned back. "So the question isn't what was inside the uniform anymore." "No," Maddie said. "The question is why he needed the uniform to read them." That landed. Daniel looked down the hallway toward my open closet. The empty space where the uniform had hung seemed louder than any argument we'd had. "I used to hate Memorial Day," he said quietly. Maddie's face changed. "Dad, no, I did." He kept staring at the papers. Every year, he'd disappear into himself. Mom would tell me to give him room. I thought that uniform pulled him away from us. I looked at him then. He did not meet my eyes. "When I saw it still hanging there," Daniel said, "I thought maybe if it wasn't in the house, he wouldn't have to go back there every year." Maddie's voice softened. "You didn't ask him." Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. "I know." That was the first honest thing he had said without defending it. He picked up the calendar and looked at those 3 words again. Read the 6. Then he looked at me, not like a caretaker, not like a son trying to win an argument, but like a man standing outside a locked door. "I thought the uniform was what kept you trapped," he said. Maddie answered before I could. Maybe it was what helped him stand. Daniel looked at the empty hallway again. Then he asked the question he should have asked years ago. "Dad, what promise did I take out of this house?" I did not answer Daniel right away. Some questions sound simple until they reach the part of you that has been locked for 50 years. Maddie pulled out the chair beside me, but did not sit. Daniel stood across the table with the calendar between us, waiting like a man who finally understood waiting was the least he owed. "The 6 men," I said, "were from my unit." Daniel's eyes moved toward Maddie's phone, where the photo of the memorial panel had gone dark. "They didn't come home," I said. Maddie whispered. "You knew all of them?" I nodded once. There are names a man can say and still keep standing. There are names that take the floor out from under him. I reached for the folded card Arthur had let me bring home for the night. My thumb found the crease without looking. "I wrote them down on the flight back," I said. "I was afraid if I slept, I'd wake up and one would be gone." Daniel's face shifted. Not guilt yet. Something quieter. Recognition trying to find a place to land. "Why read them every year?" he asked. "Because their mothers did not get to hear their voices again," I said. "Their fathers did not get to see them walk through the door. Somebody had to put breath to their names." Maddie sat down then. Daniel looked at the card in my hand. "And the medal?" I closed my fingers around the paper. The room changed when he asked that. Even Maddie felt it. "That's not the same story," I said. "But it's connected," Daniel said. I looked at him sharply. He did not step back this time. "The empty slot is beside the card. You touched it every time someone asked about the names. For years, Daniel had missed everything. Now he was noticing too much." Maddie spoke gently. "Grandpa, we don't need all of it tonight." I appreciated the mercy, but mercy can become another kind of hiding. I opened the card and looked at the third name. My throat closed. "I made a promise," I said. Daniel leaned forward. "To who?" I folded the card again, slower this time. "To someone who had already lost enough." I opened the folded card again and laid it on the table. Daniel did not reach for it. That mattered. "The third name," I said, tapping it once, "was Thomas Avery." Maddie read it under her breath, careful with each sound. "Tommy," I said. His mother called him Tommy. She was 5 feet tall and could make a room full of officers stand straighter just by looking at them. Daniel sat down slowly. "When his effects came back, there wasn't much," I said. "A watch with a cracked face, 2 letters, a photograph, no medal." Maddie's eyes lifted to mine. "They told her paperwork got delayed," I said. "Maybe it did. Maybe somebody made a mistake. Maybe war just kept taking after it was already done taking." Daniel looked toward the hallway, as if he could still see the empty place where the uniform used to hang. "I had mine," I said. "Same campaign, same mud, same month. I took it off before I went to see her." Daniel's voice was barely there. "You gave her your medal." I gave her something to hold. The room went still. Maddie wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand, angry at the tear for arriving before she was ready. "She asked me if her boy had been brave," I said. I told her yes. Then I promised her his name would not disappear into a file drawer. Daniel stared at the donation form beside the calendar. Family donation, preservation. His own words looked different now. "I thought," he said, then stopped. I waited. He tried again. "I thought I was taking away something that hurt you. You took away the place where I kept my word." Daniel flinched like I had struck him, but I had not raised my voice. Maddie looked from him to me. "Can the museum still keep it?" I looked at the card. Then at the empty slot that was not in the room but might as well have been. "Only if they understand it," I said. Daniel picked up the donation form with both hands. For the first time, he looked ashamed of the signature. "What do I have to do," he asked, "to give it back to you?" Arthur unlocked the museum after closing and left the front lights low. He did not ask questions. He simply led us to the back room, where my uniform waited on the padded table beneath a single lamp. Daniel stopped before he reached it. The donation form was in his hand, folded once across his own signature. Maddie stood beside him, holding the index card like it might tear if anyone breathed too hard. Arthur looked at me. "Mr. Henson, I'll be at the front desk if you need me." That was all he said. When he walked away, the room felt smaller. Daniel placed the donation form on the table, but not near the uniform. "I need to say something before I ask anything." I watched him. "I thought I was saving you from a memory," he said. "I didn't know I was taking away the way you kept a promise." Maddie looked down. Daniel's voice cracked, but he did not try to hide it. "I made myself the owner of something I never even understood. I could have made him suffer longer. A younger man in me might have wanted that. But the uniform was lying between us, and the 6 names were heavier than anger." Daniel looked at Maddie. "May I see the card?" She handed it to him slowly. He held it with both hands, the way Arthur had held it, the way a person holds something after learning it can hurt if handled carelessly. "I want to read them," he said. "Not because it fixes anything, because I should have known them before I touched that uniform." I did not answer right away. Then I reached for the jacket, lifted the metal bar gently, and opened the small space where the card had rested for years. "Put it back first," I said. Daniel blinked. "They weren't carried loose," I said. "They had a place." He slid the card behind the metal bar with careful fingers. Then he stood straighter, as if the room had given him orders. Maddie moved beside me. Daniel read the first name, then the second. On the third, he stumbled. "Thomas Avery, I said, sharper than I meant to. Daniel stopped. I saw him swallow, nod once, and start again from the beginning. This time, he said all 6 names slowly enough for the walls to hear them. When he finished, nobody clapped, nobody hugged, nobody made it pretty. Maddie reached for my hand. Daniel looked at me, his eyes wet but steady. "I thought the uniform was keeping you in the past. I didn't understand you were keeping them present. For a long moment, all I could hear was the old building settling around us. Then I touched the sleeve of the uniform and said, 'Now you know why it wasn't yours to give.'" Daniel nodded, but his eyes moved to the blank museum display card waiting beside the table. "What should it say?" he asked. Arthur brought over a clean display card and set it beside the uniform without saying a word. Daniel picked up the pen, then stopped. He looked at me the way a son looks when he finally understands permission is not a formality. "What do you want it to say, Dad?" I looked at the uniform under the lamp. For 2 days, it had been passed around like an object. Now it waited like something alive. "Start with on loan," I said. Daniel nodded and wrote slowly. Maddie stood close enough to read over his shoulder. "Not donated?" "No," Daniel said quietly. "Not donated." His hand paused after my name. "Staff Sergeant Walt Henson," I said. He wrote that too, each letter careful. Then the room went still again, because the next part mattered most. I touched the metal bar, the one with the empty space that would stay empty. "Displayed with permission," I said, in memory of the 6 men whose names he carried. Daniel finished the sentence, but his hand shook before he reached the period. Arthur took the card, read it once, and placed it in the small holder beside the uniform. He did not correct a word. For a long moment, none of us moved. The uniform looked different now. The same brass buttons, the same dark cloth, the same missing metal, but the tag that had made me feel erased was gone. In its place was my name, my permission, and their memory. Maddie slipped her hand into mine. "Can I come with you next Memorial Day?" I looked at her. She did not smile like a child asking for a treat. She looked like someone asking to carry something real. "If you come," I said, "you read the second name." She nodded. "Okay." Daniel looked down at the floor. "And me?" That question cost him something. I could hear it. I did not make forgiveness easy, because it was not easy, but I did not close the door either. "You listen first," I said. He nodded once. "I can do that." Arthur switched off the lamp above the worktable, then turned on the small case light. The uniform stood behind the glass, no longer waiting to be taken, no longer mislabeled by somebody else's good intentions. Daniel stayed beside me until everyone else had stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," I answered. "It was not everything, but it was a beginning." Before we left, I reached into my coat pocket and found the folded card. I held it for one last second, then slid it back behind the metal bar where it belonged. 6 names rested against the uniform again, Only this time, I was not the only one who knew they were there.